Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Hey, everyone, we'll give folks another minute or two to join. I think usually to this meeting, folks show up a bit late. Okay. It looks like we haven't had anyone join the past couple minutes. So I think we get started. Welcome, everyone. Happy 2023, if I haven't seen you. As a reminder, please record attendance in the meeting notes. I think put a link in the chat, and I think everyone already saw that who's here. I think it looks like we have like 9 people. And also that will abide by the Linux Foundation Code of Conduct. Let me look in chat. Is there are there any new members here? Looks like we have a small group today. I think I recognize all these names. I think I recognize everyone. Okay, and then we could start with updates from the special interest groups. I could go first for the specification. We are planning to tentatively have a release candidate for the 1.0 spec, both of like the levels and the provenance. Optimistically, the first week of February. The idea is that we will time box it and effectively cut whatever we have as a release candidate because it's in a good enough state to review. And then hopefully mark it as stable after a significant review and editing period. I think no earlier than the end of February, but realistically probably sometime in March. And once we get it finalized, the idea is that we'll kind of like time box or release candidates and say we're going to cut it now, but not necessarily the stable release. That we'll mark it as final only once we're actually confident in it and we think it's good. The thinking being that what people really want is a stable, good release. And so if we do a release quickly of 1.0 and then follow up with 1.1, it won't actually satisfy what people want, which is like they just want it done so they can work and implement it. And there's two things going on. One is the spec itself. There's a couple pull requests out now. I didn't link to them in the meeting notes about verifying systems and verifying artifacts. Those are the last major pieces to be added to the spec. There's certainly a lot more writing to do, like the threats page isn't updated yet, and there's a bunch of to-dos and clarifications, and we have to address some of the items that were listed in the on the project board on like clarifications. But the core bones of what is there, I think, is mostly there. And so the plan is by the end of the month, by the end of January, we should have at least all submitted so people could review it and start to like, internalize these concepts and see if they resonate and they work well. And we have time to edit it as needed. And then the Provenance 1.0, similarly, we have a pull request right now. It's not submitted yet, but I'm hoping to submit it hopefully this week. It is definitely not decided. There's some open-ended, some open questions there around like what's the best design, because there's, at least in my opinion, no obvious best design. But what we want to do is have it submitted so that way people can easily review it and add comments and start to implement it in like a implement prototypes. And so we can get better feedback. Yeah, I think those are the main things on the spec side. Feel free to jump in if I missed anything, anyone. Positioning, I'm guessing it's Melba.
Hey, Mark. So for the first item, I did bring up in the last SLSA meeting of the year. I also brought it up in the SLSA specification meeting. And then we also talked about it yesterday in the supply chain integrity working group meeting about more communication, more collaboration within SLSA, within supply chain integrity working group. And so for SLSA specifically, kind of like what Fresca, Mike, who's on the call, they have a roadmap for 2023, right? I would like to see SLSA have a roadmap as well. Obviously 1.0 is part of that, but okay, what's after that, right? What are we trying to aim for? So that way we all can kind of go towards that vision from a tooling, from a positioning perspective. So that's kind of the first piece. And then as part of that, one of the things for positioning is that Laurent brought up in passing was about conferences for 2023, right? So that yet is another roadmap item. As the SLSA community, what do we want to participate in as a group, not necessarily as individuals for our company, but as the SIG leads or as a group, which conferences are we going to try to target submitting talks to? And so we've started doing that brainstorming for the salsa group to say, okay, we want to have a salsa for beginners, we want to have a what's new, we want to have a lab, right, and submit it as a salsa group. So it would be great if we can have a roadmap for 2023 on all aspects of salsa.
Do those two items, the roadmap and the coordinating the talks, is there a lead for each of those? Like a single person who's going to kind of drive it?
I mean, I can drive it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't mind
That'd be great.
driving it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just we got to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of my point. So I'm hoping, I think many of you agree. So it's more of the buy-in. Let's just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like those things are the kind that like people would generally agree, but it takes like some like cat herding and like nudging people and getting it to like make it actually happen. So that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think two things to follow up on the conference part is one is I think we should definitely reach out to the chairs and those who are putting on the conferences, just to make sure that we could potentially have some time associated specifically for salsa, right, as opposed to necessarily needing to compete with everybody else who's submitting talks, because this is similar to, let's say, how the CNCF has maintainer tracks, where projects like ours could have a handful of talks that are just allocated, and then we get to choose as we see fit. And another reason for that is the way that LF or at least most LF project rules work. LF conference rules work is that if you give a talk, like you're only allowed to give one talk at a conference. And for a lot of folks who might be interested in, let's say, helping out with salsa, might be a little bit less inclined to, if they find out like, hey, actually, from my standpoint, I want to give a talk on this thing, and I want to submit a talk there, but I would, and I can't do both. So that's something that is, whereas in the CNCF at least, you can give a talk, like you could give a talk that's your own talk on whatever you want to do in open source, as well as a talk as on behalf as a maintainer on a CNCF related project. So I think some of those things would be useful to just sort of get ironed out. And I also know that there's a million different tracks inside of the open source summit, and it can be a little unclear which one it would fall under exactly, whether it's OpenSSF Day or Supply Chain Con. So that's something else there.
That's it for me. Tooling's next.
Okay, so from the tooling side, the main things I think we're focused on right now is trying to hit 1.0. And it's been a little, we haven't had a ton of attendance the past few weeks. I'm hoping to kind of bring that back in the new year. The main things are, and I'll add this into the, okay, thanks Melba for adding it in. So the main things that we're looking to try and do is, the big one is any projects that have a short sort of release cycle. So this is stuff like underneath the Salsa GitHub org itself, stuff like the Salsa GitHub generator and so on, those sorts of things. It would be nice to see if we can get those pretty much as soon as possible ready for the draft of the 1.0 provenance spec, just so that we can kind of show some examples to some folks on how they might implement it and so on and so forth, and also help potentially roadmap or get on the roadmap for some other projects like that have a longer release cadence, like Tecton, which is a big the Tecton chains, which supports v0.1 and v0.2 of the provenance spec, making sure that they're like at least aware of, hey, here's this draft. They might not be willing to sort of implement the draft if the draft is going to only be around for, let's say, a couple of months, whereas they might be more, push for sort of just being ready for the full-fledged 1.0 when it's ready. but just those are the things I think we're kind of a bit focused on. Secondarily, we're focused on still working with some of the different ecosystems and projects about maybe building out some either examples or documentation around what we believe should be supported or like the best practices around distributing SLSA metadata. Because I know this has been a talk in the past, or we know that there's been a talk in the past of like a lot of folks who let's say run different packaging ecosystems are like, hey, if we were to distribute SLSA provenance, should it be part of the package? Should it be part of an API that's associated with the package? How should this work? And I think some of that might prove to be useful, even having some like, you know, a simple a simple like API example or something like that. So those are I think the main threads. Bruno, I don't know if there's anything oh, sorry. No, it wasn't Bruno. It was Eric who was talking about something else. Never mind.
I tried
That's
to
it for me.
capture what you said, so feel free to edit away if I missed something.
Thank you. I saw there's a thing by Laurent here, but he doesn't look like he's at the meeting, so we'll skip that. And is Ozra here? Looks like Ozra is not here as well. I think I'll just move that to the next time, and oh, Michael, yeah.
Oh yeah, so I do know that one of the things that Laurent had brought up, this is in Slack chat, was potentially something like a SLSA con, and if that makes sense. And I think I know personally, I think there's more than enough conferences. That's just my opinion, but I think that there is something valuable there of like, especially for gearing up for 1.0. And this is something I forgot to talk about when Milba was saying is it might still be worthwhile to have something like a pre or post 1.0 webinar or something like that, or like a virtual SLSA day where like, hey, we are releasing 1.0 or we've just released 1.0 and you want to know stuff like here, you know, it'll be half a day or a day's worth of virtual talks where people can kind of get a good understanding of how to get started. Might be useful.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, I think that was it for what was on the agenda. Any other topics?
Just to underscore something I thought was interesting, you know, helping with the verifying build systems PR. It seems like there might be some sort of interest around creating an attestation spec for verification of the build system, which I thought was kind of neat. So just want to underscore that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, Aaron. A few of us have been looking at, for example, for Guac, integrating like something like that sort of attestation so that you could associate all builds associated with that, like, sorry, all SLSA provenance that has that listed as potentially like a build ID or builder ID or builder, whatever, can, you know, so folks can go and say, oh, this has been certified by like self-certified or it's certified by a third-party auditor. Okay, cool. I know that I trust, like I transitively trust all SLSA provenance that is based on this, that comes from, you know, this sort of questionnaire or whatever. The other thing actually that's related there, that I don't know if anybody's heard anything back regarding the SLSA conformance stuff. I know a lot of folks are starting to ask a lot of questions, especially with the questionnaire, PR, and some of the other stuff that's been getting sort of spun up there, where I know a lot of folks are just like, hey, what's kind of the status of that? I don't know if anybody has that.
I haven't heard any update.
Okay, we could definitely follow up. I believe Kim and there was somebody else who were helping lead that up, so I can reach out.
Okay, it sounds like that's it. I wonder, actually, should we make this just a 30-minute meeting instead of 60 minutes? It seems like the last several sessions we've only used 30 minutes.
So I was just going to say, actually, one of the things I would just be interested in is I would love if, like, because what we used to do was like usually the first 30 minutes would be stuff like this, and then usually the last 30 minutes would be somebody giving a demo of how they implemented SLSA and some of that stuff. And I'd be curious to know if folks are, you know, interested in some of that, doing some of that again. I know we're interested in demoing off some of the stuff we've done with Guac plus SLSA to sort of show how you can sort of integrate all those pieces together. But we're also not sure what's the best meeting anymore to sort of show that often. Is that SLSA tooling? Is that more of a SLSA positioning demo because it's kind of like combining a bunch of different pieces, or what?
Trishank?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think, I mean, Michael does raise that interesting point. I think with the split of so many meetings now, we have, you know, a meeting for tooling and specification and so on, that we may not need the whole hour for the general meeting, but that's just my 2 cents. Someone else go ahead, please.
I guess I can repeat myself from chat. So I'd vote to try to keep this meeting an hour and focus any of those sort of like demos from the different SIGs into this. You know, encourage folks to join, especially, and maybe we can broadcast when we know some interesting demos are coming up. And then the actual work gets done in the SIG meetings is kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I like that idea, Aaron, and I don't want to volunteer Melba, but Melba, I wonder if the positioning meeting, like if the positioning group can help with like maybe helping organize some of that stuff, like, you know, making sure that folks know like, hey, there's a monthly SLSA meeting and we're always looking for demos, and you know, and that sort of thing.
I mean, yeah, I don't mind doing that. Now, I am curious how that will play out if we're up. I forget what Josh said yesterday, upvoted or something like that. They're talking about moving positioning up to supply chain security.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
if that, or supply chain integrity rather, so if that happens, then there's only 2 specification and tooling, right? And then this meeting, right? So again, I'm more than happy to keep doing that until that happens, but I don't know if that happens, and what do we do then? So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So then the SIG meetings would be about more like kind of nitty gritty topics of like working through the details. And this is just a more general interest meeting. And we just happen to not use up the time, but it's useful to have the slot available. Okay, sounds great. All right, thanks for clarifying, everyone. Okay, doke. All right, well, it was good seeing all of you, although I think I've seen most of you in the SIG meetings. And we'll see you again in the next meeting, or talking over GitHub or on Slack, or at the next community meeting. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye now.